what I notice is that my average entrepreneurs, the ones that are successful, think about revenue. Some of my really good ones think in terms of profit, but the ones who stand out head and shoulders above the rest have a wealth mentality, that they are doing work to create wealth, not just to grow rev.
Welcome to the Four Fires Podcast, where we talk about winning in all four of the essential areas of life.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Four Fires Podcast. This is Alan Kemper again, and I am here with Justin Lambert, and today we are going to unpack wealth building mentality. So, welcome again, Justin.
Thanks for having me again.
So, Justin, give people who may not know you just a little bit of your current state in life, and so that we have context for the conversation that we're about to have.
So currently in life, I have been sort of on the sidelines or semi-retired from several businesses that we've started for about 5 years. And I have enjoyed the time that I've been getting to spend with my little girls, and they have just started school. My youngest started kindergarten yesterday. So this is my first time where I have been without a lunch buddy or somebody to hang around the house with me and get to spend time with. So I got a little bored and decided to come up here and talk to you guys. So thanks for helping me fill my day, pass the time without thinking about my little buddies that I'm missing. I kind of took the approach of, I always feel like we have it backwards when we think about retirement and things like that, and taking breaks and stuff like that. Because you watch so many of your either parents or grandparents go through this, I'm going to work for 40 years and then I'm going to retire. Mm-hmm. And they retire at 65, 70 years old, and either their health's not there or they're not able to do some of the things that they really wanted to do in retirement, go big game hunting in Montana or things like that, or extravagant, trips and things. So that was sort of my approach when I became somewhat successful financially in some of our, business ventures, is I wanted to spend that time with my girls. I have two girls, currently a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. One's in second grade, one just started kindergarten. And I got to spend the first 7 years of their life with them every day, basically, being around them at home if I wanted to, or, going on trips, or basically exposing them to things that I felt like would be good for their childhood. And so that's kind of where, I decided to take my professional fires, just sort of, I've done well financially, so I just wanted to sort of put that on hold and allow myself to sort of learn to, build wealth without actually being an operator, mm-hmm. and have been able to do that while, sort of semi-retiring. So that's kind of, where I am in today's.
Yeah. So it's been fun for me to watch because 5 years ago, kind of hard to believe, but I remember we were coming up with a plan for mm-hmm. you to transition out of the operations of one of your first companies. And we used your daughter's birth as
that was the breaking point.
The moment we said, hey, you're going to take some paternity leave to just kind of step away and see how it goes.
We severed the proverbial umbilical cord at the same time that we did the literal one.
And came back, right?
And I never came back. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So that was a neat season, and it's been fun to get to watch you shift into, we talk about in our professional fire, you have your craft and your ability to convert your craft into cash.
Correct.
And I think early on, you were all in on, you got very good early in life at understanding strategy and systems and recognizing opportunity and then digging in. A lot of, you're a high energy person, you're a risk taker, not afraid to go hire someone, throw them at a problem. I think you figured that piece out pretty early. Let's see, how old are you now?
39.
Okay, so when you were 34
mm-hmm.
and stepped away from the businesses full time, I do feel like there was a shift in your craft. Like
agreed completely.
It was, you went from being the operator to the owner, and that may be a conversation for another podcast.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one, actually.
Yeah, the shift from operator to owner. But what I'd really like to talk to you about is, and we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast, I've had an opportunity to coach a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who are running really, really large organizations, who've had a lot of professional success. I noticed some difference in how entrepreneurs think. And I'll frame it this way. I was once asked a question. This is actually when I was still a college professor. I got asked this question. Hey, Alan, what do you notice about the people that you coach? What's the difference in the good ones and the great ones? And what came out of my mouth was, what I notice is that my average entrepreneurs, the ones that are successful, think about revenue. Some of my really good ones think in terms of profit, but the ones who stand out head and shoulders above the rest have a wealth mentality, that they are doing work to create wealth, not just to grow rev. And I think that's something that you entered into your business pretty early on, whether you knew it or not.
Right.
That was part of your initial goal. So you want to unpack that for us a little bit, and where did that come from, and what do you think I mean when I'm talking about building wealth?
Right. So for me, early on, when I was going through childhood, I guess, one of the things that I remember my dad always talking about was, and sort of his goal, it was like he always wanted to get to a certain number in his investment accounts or whatever. Like, eventually I want to be able to make $2 million or have $2 million in an account so that I can earn 5% interest a year off that, and it'd be $100,000 that I could use every single year as my salary. So, I mean, at the time, he probably didn't have $100,000 in his account, but his goal was to try to get to $2 million because he wanted to get to a 5% number that he would be okay with for basically his salary. It's the same way you look at retirement. I want to get this much money in an account so that one day it can spit out this much money every single year for the rest of my life. That's sort of the way people look at retirement. And that's sort of the same approach that I felt like was in my mind all the time. My number was a little bit, bit bigger. I was a little more ambitious.
And earlier. You wanted to get it done earlier.
Earlier, that's right. It's the SMART goal thing, specific,
Time
measurable.
bound.
Exactly. I wanted a time bound. And I like putting that pressure on myself to make it a tight window because I feel like I operate better under pressure. And I think being under pressure also makes you have to come out of your comfort zone a little more. Whereas if you give yourself to you're 70 years old, when you're 30, you're not really concerned about it. Or if you're 25, you're not that concerned about hitting that number when you turn 70. Oh, it'll come. It'll come. But if you're 25 and you say I want to hit that number by the time I'm 35, that channels a different thought process and a different set of stages for how you're going to get this done and what that looks like over a 1 to 5 year period. When I talk to entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's I want to know why you're doing this. Why did I sell women's clothes online? That was one of our companies, and it wasn't that I had this appreciation for women's clothes. Like I've never been into fashion much, but for me it was I wanted to build wealth. I wanted to get to this number in this account. I wanted to put myself in a position that I would be able to hit these goals in the time frame that I wanted to hit them in. Yeah. And sort of that's sort of the mentality that led me to start looking at it a little bit differently and why I got into what I was getting into. Because when you ask entrepreneurs why do you go out and start your own business? Because you want to do $10 million in revenue, or because you want to make $1 million and take home $1 million, Well, do you want to take home $1 million and the government's going to get 400 and you're going to be left with 600? So you really want to take home 6? It's like that. You start to get down to what are you really trying to accomplish here? And so that's usually my first question is, why are you doing this?
So when you ask people that question, I think there's that answer, that implicit, okay, I want to make money. But if it stops there, I think the implication is I want to make and spend money simultaneously.
For sure.
And that's different than wealth creation. So you were in your 30s and you started making some money, and then there's this temptation to spend some money. And what is the process? Because I think that there are some people who go out there and they are building companies or they are advancing in their careers, and then their lifestyle advances proportionally to their income, and that's different. Yes, you are earning more money. You might go from earning $100,000 a year to $1 million a year.
Right.
But if your lifestyle goes from $100,000 a year to $1 million a year, you did not build wealth.
That's exactly right.
You just built lifestyle.
Correct.
And so what is required? What do you have to give up for wealth building?
So one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got when I was in college was from a professor that told us the best financial advice he could give us is to live the first year of your life out of college like you did while you're in college. And I was like, I got to thinking about that. And, in college, you're not making any money really, unless you get a part-time job or co-op program like we did or whatever. But at the same time, you have a microscope on your expenses pretty much. You're living as cheap as you possibly can live, and you're having to pay tuition and things like that. Well, all of a sudden, when you get out of school, you turn around and you start making $50,000 or $100,000 or something like that. And you're still, if you can still spend the same amount that you were spending and keep those expenses under that microscope, there's a big chunk of money now that you are going to accumulate in that 12-month period of time.
Yeah.
And that can have, with compounding interest, that can have just a phenomenal effect on your life 10 years from now. The problem that I see, because we hired a bunch of undergrad or graduates, recent graduates, the problem I see that they experience is, it's like you said, their expenses are in a direct correlation to their income. Mm-hmm. And if you can make your income, the rate of your income increase is that rate is much higher than your rate that your expenses increase. Those two, one line's kind of flat on expenses, and one line is sort of going up at a 45-degree angle on your income. And the difference between those two lines, the further you go, gets bigger, bigger, and bigger. And to me, that's sort of the first step in putting yourself in a position to start generating wealth versus just income, expenses, and just maintaining these lifestyles that you have. That was a really big piece for me to set the tone, because if you can apply that same logic of I want to live the first year of my life out of school that I did while I was in school, do that every time you get a promotion, do that every time your salary goes up, or do that every time you change jobs and increase your income. Do that every time your company goes from $1 million to $5 million or something like that. If you can maintain that current lifestyle, your expenses are pretty much flat, but your income is now jumping up at levels that's outpacing your increase in expenses. Yeah. A lot of people try to keep up with the Joneses way too early. And I feel like the Joneses have it, they got generational wealth. Yeah. And that was sort of my goal too, was to build generational wealth where I could take care of those that come after me, and that sort of be my gift to them, to know that I had an influence or played a part in their life, in their lifestyle.
Another podcast topic entirely will be how do we make sure we don't wreck our children with wealth?
Oh, yes.
So some of it is this delayed gratification, right? This ability to say, I know I could. There was an experiment that they did, the marshmallow test. Have you ever heard about this? Mm-mm. So the Stanford University professor did this test where he took these 4-year-olds and put them in the room and said, hey, here's a marshmallow. It's on the table. You can eat it if you want to. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Oh, I've seen them do this with kids.
Yeah, I'll be back in a few minutes. And the marshmallows now you can eat that marshmallow if you want, but if you wait until I get back, and it was an undisclosed amount of time,
right?
If you wait until I get back, you can have 2 marshmallows. And so they looked at these kids, and some large percentage of them just ate the marshmallow,
right?
But some of them were able to restrain themselves, and they ended up with 2 marshmallows. They studied these kids later at high school graduation.
Wow.
And what they found out is that they had higher SAT scores, they had lower BMI, body weight, They had lower anxiety, lower instances of drug abuse. And so the principle is can you teach your children delayed gratification early on? The ability to not just do what feels good in the moment, whether that's eating a marshmallow or whether that's buying a new car.
That's right.
So the adult versions of that are a little more socially acceptable.
You're right.
So we really have to think about, what do I need to say not now to? Not no.
Right. Not now.
But not now.
Yep.
Did you have any systems in place or any ways of thinking? Like, did you ever say, all right, I want my income to grow more than my expenses, so I'm only ever going to have my expenses be X portion of my income? Or did you say, I'm going to reward myself with some kind of car or a new house when? Did you have ratios, or are you just already kind of wired for that delayed gratification?
I never had and it's funny because I'm always a numbers guy. I'm always the engineer, math, data, science, love it all. I never really set up a budget for myself where I knew it was $75 for the power bill. It was $100. I always did it in totals where it's I know I need $2,000 this month to carry all these things, and then it's, well, if I can make sure that my checking account is outrunning that $2,000, the more I can let the checking account outrun it, I know that it's just $2,000, $2,000, $2,000, $2,000 every month from now. But if the checking account, if it gets to be $4,000 and $6,000 and $7,000, I'm starting to build, these nest eggs. That then I can, try to do something with. And that's, it's funny because the nest egg that I built prior to starting my companies, I actually used that nest egg to start my company.
I remember that story.
Yeah. And so, it's not necessarily this whole model of, save, invest, put it in an investment account, But I truly believe that doing something now can help you really do something big later. Yeah. And I've always had that big goal in mind. I mean, back in the day, my number used to be, $5 million is what I want my number to be, because at 5% interest, I can make $250,000 for the rest of my life and live the lifestyle I want and never have to worry about it.
Yep.
And so I feel like that's always a good idea, is to figure out what it is that you want. Because a lot of people I talk to, you ask me about, asking that first question. A lot of people I talk to, they'll say financial freedom. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I drill down. I fight back when they say that, because to me, that's different for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what kind of lifestyle are you trying to live to be financially free? Because you can get in a really small house and no car payments and stuff like that, and you can make $80,000 a year and be financially free. Yep. But you're saying that you want to continue the current lifestyle that you have, where you're spending $150,000 a year and you're making $250,000 a year. You're trying to continue that lifestyle, and you want to be financially free. Okay, what does that look like? And so to me, anybody that says financial freedom, they've got to drill down and figure out.
Better quantify.
They got to quantify that. What does that number look like? Because in doing the Ruck, we do the mentor stuff, and I actually was kind of humbled that a couple of guys asked me to be their mentor, and that was one of the first exercises that we did was, what does that really look like? We spend this much money, or I want a boat. I want a little farm for me and my kids to go play on. All right, well, there's a number there. What does that look like? And back your way down. And then it was neat to see that one of the guys I was doing this with was, I'm going to say this number, and I'm going to say only $6,000 a month away from what he wanted, which in the grand scheme of things of what he was doing is not that far away. So it was encouraging for him to do that exercise, because he realized that he's not that far from the lifestyle or the financial freedom that he really wants. And so, then all of a sudden it becomes, well, how do you make an extra $72,000 a year? And for some people that would be harder than others, but in his situation, I feel like he's a lot closer than he thinks, and that was exciting for him. Yeah, that he is that close, and that that he could do those kind of things. So I feel like that financial freedom answer, for a lot of guys, that's usually the answer. So I want financial freedom. And what does that look like? I want the ability to do what? You know, I want to be able to decide when I go to work or when I don't want to go to work, or I don't want to go to work at all, or I want to be able to go on these trips or do these things. Yeah. So I feel like that's if that's usually your answer, then there's some deeper reasons behind that financial freedom.
But even in that, like, I mean, it's I want to have an additional X amount of dollars per month.
Exactly.
Is not the same unless you're saying, and it's coming from a sustainable source.
For sure.
Again, it's easy to think about revenue. Mm-hmm. It's a little harder to think about profit. I know a lot of business owners.
I was guilty of that for a long time.
Chasing rev.
Yep.
And not as clear on. I mean, I talked to a business owner the other day, and he was like, I said, you got 30 accounts. Do you know which ones are profitable? Like, he had no idea. He was losing. It turns out, we did an analysis of it. He was losing money on 3 of his largest accounts.
Right.
And we're like, why don't you fire them? Well, because then my rev will go down. I was
right.
Like, but your take-home money will
That's right.
go
That's
higher.
Right. You can do $19 million and lose money, or we can do 12 and you can take home $1 million.
Yeah.
Which one do you want to do?
Which one do you want?
That's right.
So you don't want to just grow it for the sake of rev.
That's right. So why are you doing this? I want to make money and take money home. Oh, okay. Well, then you can take the $1 million profit and 12 million rev versus 19 million rev and 0 profit.
That's right. Are you directionally correct?
Exactly.
On what you're trying to do?
I love that.
But I think the even more powerful number than, hey, I want to do the $12 million company and the $1 million in rev is I want to do that for 5 years.
Exactly.
And live off of $100,000, and in 5 years have close to $5 million in the bank, and then I'll keep doing this other thing, and then maybe you live off the $1 million a year in profit, but you got the $5 million.
That's right.
Kicking off $250,000 a year.
Yep, and you can decide what you want to do with that.
That's right.
I want to kick it back into the $5 million bucket, or I'm going to take it and siphon it off and do what I want to do with it.
That's right. But there's creating some wealth stability early on, and I think that's an important piece. There's all kinds of maturing. You know, you meet a kid and you're like, oh man, that kid, it can walk up to, like, I met an 8-year-old the other day, and he walked up to me and started asking me questions about my job and what I do and what I like about my job. Like, I was having an adult conversation with this 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And I just was like, wowed by his social maturity. Like, I think there's spiritual maturity. There's all of us. This Four Fires journey is about us growing. I think there is a professional maturing that happens in most of us, and I think one of the keys is this delayed gratification and the ability to quantify what we want and then go fight for it.
That's right.
So, Justin, if you're talking to somebody, I mean, there's a broad range of people listening.
Right.
I mean, there are people who are coming straight out of college here who are what I call the professional flailing stage.
That's right. Yeah.
Just trying to
figure it
grasp and figure it out. What am I even good at? And then there's some people who are at a stage in their life where they feel like maybe they're trapped because they've gone down this path and they had these aspirations for growing, living into a lifestyle. We start with the young person.
Okay.
What's your number one piece of advice for someone who wants to create wealth they're in their early 20s? If you were their college professor, knowing, because your college professor doesn't know what you know now.
That's right.
What would you tell them to lean into?
So I read a book one time, and it talked about you can't get rich from a paycheck. The summary of the book is basically that it's very hard to be an employee for 40 years and get rich. And if your goal is to get rich or to build wealth or however you want to define that, that is very, very hard to do with an employee paycheck that you're going to get. And so, but I also understand the reality of I've got to do something to pay bills. I've got to be able to live. And so I understand that's usually the road everyone has to take. And that's sort of the road that I get frustrated with, just society in general, of, you know, we go through school and college and everything. We're just breeding a bunch of people to get in line and get a job and work for other people. So my biggest thing is the earlier you can try to do either have a side hustle or to start your own business for as little money as possible, I cannot recommend doing that more than that would be the number one thing I would do, is try to create a side hustle. I do not like the whole follow your passion thing. If you want to sell, if you're a guy that's into hunting or sports or whatever, and it's like, I want to go create a camouflage company and it's going to take $100,000 to develop all this stuff. Like, no, like if you can go, if you can just go sell anything. I sold women's clothes.
Yeah.
I was like, what can I look at that's relatively inexpensive for me to get into, that doesn't cost me a lot of money to start up, that's high demand, that has a broad customer base, that I could, market to. It's like I tell people all the time, I don't want the whole pie. I don't want a piece of the pie. I'll take the crumbs. Mm-hmm. You think about the women's clothing industry, the crumbs you can make a substantial living on. Yeah. You can build extreme wealth with just the crumbs of a market like that. So, you're saying look for a business opportunity, not a hobby extension. Exactly. Don't look for a hobby. Look for a business opportunity. Look for a place where you can convert a small amount of cash into a bigger amount of cash. Doesn't have to be a huge amount of cash. Mm-hmm. Just look for a way to double it. Mm-hmm. Look for a way to 3x is what we usually look for. And but when you're young like that, you've got the rest of your life to overcome any burden you put yourself or hole you put yourself into. And your expenses aren't near what they could be if you were married with kids and house payments and car payments and all that kind of stuff. So the younger you are, the easier it is to try lots of things. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, my advice would be try as many things as fast as you can. And fail fast is a good mantra to live by. Mm-hmm. If it's not going to work and you feel like you can't fight through it to make it work, let it go and go on to something else. Don't let your ego get in the way of fail. Mark Cuban always says, in business, you only have to be right once. Mm. You can fail 100 times at a business, or 99 times, and the one time you're right, it could be a $10 million business that spits off $2 million of profit every year for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would you be able to look your friends in the face and say, I failed 99 times? Yep. Your community's looking at you, oh, that guy's a failure, and then you're sitting up there with one winner, and you got more money than the rest of them, and they're going to work every single day, and you're living financially free and doing whatever it is you want to do. Yep. So it's kind of like, another piece of advice is to let go of your ego. Mm. There is so much money to be made behind letting go of your ego. I mean, I'm a male chemical engineering graduate that sold women's clothes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, yep. when you're around your buddies and everybody's talking about what you do, well, I'm a lawyer and I'm a doctor and I'm a dentist, and what do? I sell women's clothes. Mm-hmm. That feels like, that hammers on your ego a little bit. And then once you learn to just accept it, like there's so much money to be made behind losing your ego. Interesting. Early on is to try as many things you can. Try something first. Low cost. That's right. Low cost. Something easy to get into. Something that, in my experience, something that's already in high demand, or people that, it's like that professor that did the study about the selling Bibles. The Columbia professor, he asked his class, he said, who is easier to sell to? Someone that is, you're a Bible salesman, and you've got to sell Bibles to these people. Do you sell it to this person that's bought 20 Bibles, or do you sell it to the person that's never bought a Bible? And the majority of the class says, sell it to the guy that hasn't bought a Bible because he's never owned a Bible. Mm-hmm. Well, this person has a pattern for buying Bibles. Interesting. So now, when you think about it like that, is it easier to sell your product to someone that's never bought it before, or is it easier to sell your product that has a habit of buying that product? Interesting. And so so sometimes when you think about it like that, it makes a lot of sense to figure out, you don't have to go find this one little bitty niche that is a product that you've got to educate people on, to teach them about. In my world, we've learned to sell things that people have a habit of buying, and it makes it way easier to sell those things. So yeah, that'd be for the young guy, for the guy just starting out. Okay. Mm-hmm. So a little more complicated. Mm-hmm. There's the guy or gal, they're in their 40s. Mm-hmm. The intent was, hey, I'm supposed to be further along than I am right now. Right. I got my education, I got a job, I'm looking at my professional fire, and I don't see a way to build wealth. Mm-hmm.
What do you think you do for somebody who's in their 40s? They're probably more established in their craft. They probably know what they're good at, but they haven't been able to convert their craft into cash as well. Mm-hmm. So they're frustrated in that space.
So it would honestly depend on what kind of responsibilities they have. Are they married? They got kids? They got house payment? The first thing I would do is we're going to analyze expenses. Mm-hmm. Let's just take a look and see, are there places where you could stay in what you're currently doing and reduce some of your expenses and start taking that chunk and doing something with it? I mean, what you do with that chunk to me is totally up for debate. Depends on the person. Depends on what you're into. You're gonna build wealth by increasing income, and the way to increase income is to do one of two things: either increase how much money that you're bringing home and keep your expenses the same, or keep what you're bringing home the same and decrease your expenses. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of like losing weight. I mean, it's just math. Mm-hmm. Your income's got to be higher than your outgoing, and vice versa. It works the other way. So I'd analyze what that guy was doing. I mean, I've seen people that make $120,000 that are putting away more money than someone's making $400,000 or $500,000, and doing something with it. Whether that's creating a side hustle, whether that's putting it in a stock market, whether that's buying real estate or doing rentals, short term, long term, investing in companies. So that's basically the first step, is just to get an understanding of. And that was something we talked about in the Ruck when we first started doing the Ruck. Was when we started talking about the professional fire and what kind of elements do we need in the Ruck to do that kind of thing. And for those of you who don't know, the Ruck's like this 30-day program that we do here, and it's basically about getting all of your fires under control in a very short amount of time, and just sort of this hyper focus on all those areas. And one of the things that we were looking at was that professional fire. And the thing that I noticed about the group was that the majority of the group didn't have a good understanding of where they were financially. Yeah. They knew they were making good money. Yep. We got a good salary. Okay, that's good. But it's kind of like focusing on revenue. Mm-hmm. So like, what are you bringing home, and then what are you doing with it? Mm-hmm. And there's lots of levers you can pull in there about even the what are you bringing home part. Are you contributing to 401k? Are you doing profit sharing? Or are you taking some deductions that you could by working at home? There's a lot to unpack there. And then it's, where is it going? What are you doing? Are you got $1,200 a month car payment? Well, could that be $600? Mm-hmm. Do you have to drive the new Tahoe, or can you drive a 12-year-old Tahoe? Mm-hmm. So that would be the first thing I would do with the person that feels like they're stuck. Is let's just see how stuck you really are. Mm. And the other side of that is, because I've seen this with some of my other buddies that are in sales. Well, they're good at their craft, but they're not necessarily good at converting that craft into cash. Well, to me, if you're a good salesman, you can sell anything. Mm-hmm. So now it may be time to take a look at, what are you selling, and what are you earning based off what you're selling. Yep. Because to me, I've seen people that aren't very good at sales go into like medical sales and do really well. Yeah. Meanwhile, there's a guy over here selling, subscriptions to something, and he is a really good salesman, but he's just selling the wrong product. Yep. And that's what I would look at with that guy. If he's doing well with his saving and doing his expensive stuff and earning a good income, but he feels like he's just stuck professionally with it, converting his craft to cash, it's okay. Well, how are you actually trying to convert that craft or that cash out of from your craft? And
I think that's kind of where I found myself. In my late 30s, early 40s, what I had figured out that I was actually really pretty good at in terms of my craft is people development. And
absolutely,
I did that. I was doing that as early on in my career in ministry. And then I was doing that, in education. I was helping grow people and develop them and get what they wanted.
Right.
I could have done that in counseling, but what I figured out is I can convert that craft into cash a whole lot more effectively by doing executive coaching, because those people can afford to pay me, and it's more valuable to them than it is to a college student.
Exactly.
It's much of the same gifting applied in different environments, and so I think that's one of the things.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah, when we look at how do we make sure that the professional firers first really get to know what you're good at. What is your craft?
Right.
Your craft is not your job.
Agreed.
Your craft, your craft is not that you own, or that you operate any particular business. Your craft is in opportunity recognition, in risk analysis, in drive, and you've taken that craft and applied it across several different platforms now. And I think for a person who's out there and is maybe feeling stuck,
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it's just sitting down with somebody who can see what your gift is, who can help you unpack that, and then help you brainstorm where does that craft help you earn more cash.
If you're married, it's a great exercise to ask your wife, what am I good
Mm-hmm.
at? What do you think my craft is?
Yep.
I remember when I think it was during the Ruck, actually,
Mm-hmm.
when we had to ask your spouse the questions or like give you your own rating on your four fires, whatever.
That's humbling.
Yeah, that's a very humbling exercise. But it's one of those things where, like, if you were a real estate agent and you ask your wife what you're good at, she's like, well, you're good at selling houses. Okay, we got to dig deeper there. What am I actually good? What am I good at that makes me good at selling houses?
Personable?
Am I personable? Am I good at
systems?
Am I good at helping people?
Yep.
Like that opens up a much broader range of opportunities to convert that craft to cash versus you're good at selling houses. Asking someone
that
else.
same skill set, you could say, oh, well, I'm good at helping people identify value in a home.
Mm-hmm.
I can articulate for them. Why can't you do that with $1 million commercial real estate?
Yeah.
You could take that same gifting and apply it at a different level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a good something to add is to basically ask someone to help you, even if you just sit down with yourself and try to write down what am I good at, your craft, or what is my craft? Because for me, I didn't know what my craft was for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was good at converting whatever my craft was into cash.
Yep.
But because to me, it's the opposite effect. In some ways, I'm jealous of what you guys have done. I got a buddy of mine that has always known he wanted to be around football.
Mm-hmm.
Great at developing young men. His dad was that way. He's that way. Since he was 3 years old, he knew he wanted to be a football coach, be around football. And it was just so awesome to watch someone that knew what they wanted to do, knew what they were good at, just go and achieve those things. Mm-hmm. Versus me, I feel like I was sort of the opposite. I felt confident about the ability to convert whatever I was good at into cash. Mm-hmm. But now I got to figure out what am I actually good at? Mm-hmm. What is my craft? And we've kind of talked about that on several occasions. So I feel like you could be. It's neat to see both sides of that coin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, if you're at that space in your mid-career or even in your late career and you feel stuck or just frustrated, don't be passive in that space.
Yeah, exactly. A cool exercise is to go look up some of the richest people that like Warren Buffett's and all those guys, and to look to see how old they were when they made their first $1 million. I mean, for a bunch of people, it's 45, 50, 60 years old, and all of a sudden, then it just accumulates later on in life, due to compounding interest, no matter what you're doing, whether it's investing or real estate or whatever. But if you're 40, 45, you don't have to be 30 years old to start a company or 25. In fact, I feel like you might be even a little more successful because you'll be wiser. You have a lot more wisdom. The only thing that hurts people that I have seen is the other responsibilities that they have acquired in that time, whether it's kids, whether it's houses, whether it's car payments, lifestyles. Whatever it is, that hurdle is a little bit harder to overcome and allocate as much time or as much income or capital that you need to be successful. Whereas early on, I feel like it's the opposite. You don't have the capital, but you have all the time.
Mm-hmm. There's still some lessons to learn if you're going to step out in your 40s. Maybe you're a little more rooted in some of your ways.
Right. Yep.
Maybe
absolutely.
A little more employee mentality than owner mentality that you got to overcome. But I think it's important early in your career, if I'm synthesizing what you just said, early in your career, you're still trying to figure out what your craft is. Mm-hmm. Try lots of things. Later in your career, you should be able to, if you ask people and you look back on your experiences and where you were really, really good, you should be able to identify some places that you might be able to even articulate,
right,
what is my craft And then ask the question, is this application of my craft the highest and best use of my time?
Love that.
And there might be a 2 or 3 year path that you have to work to 1 foot on one lily pad, 1 foot on the other, or you might just be able to make a jump. These are also great conversations to have in the professional fire section of the Four Fires tribe community. There's a lot of smart people there. There's a lot of
wisdom in there,
for sure.
A lot of experience.
Sure. So if that's you, if you find yourself in this space in life where you're wondering whether it's early in your career or later in your career, reach out. This is a community of people who want to help all of us win in all 4 areas. Justin, I appreciate your thoughts on this. I've gotten a lot out of just thinking about wealth creation instead of just revenue generation. I think it encourages me to practice delayed gratification a little bit more, even as I grow my own business, making sure, I like that visual that you gave us about making sure that your income is growing at a higher proportion than your expenses. And if I'm really being honest, you got to look at those numbers. You got to be able to quantify that.
Right.
It's important to know their numbers. It's the same way if you ask most people, how many calories did you eat yesterday?
Well, it's like what you always tell me is you can't manage what you can't measure.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so having those real numbers in front of you, if you don't have a system for measuring that, you're probably not going to win in that space.
That's your first step.
Thanks for joining us today. That was a great conversation. I hope that is applicable. Four Fires Tribe, if you are out there, the difference between knowledge and wisdom is application. If you heard something today that you thought, that's a good idea, pause, do something, and apply it. Whether that's you make a phone call to a friend that's going to help you unpack your craft, whether that's you join the tribe and post a question in there, do something that takes action on whatever thought you're having right now. Move it into action. At the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to make the difference in the long term. So go live intentionally.